calm people of Reddit, what made you lose your absolute shit that time? My 7th trip to the DMV when trying to reinstate my license. Every single time they scrutinized my paperwork and always managed to find something wrong and would send me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally resorted to, "You have no proof that you ever had a license," despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record, among other things. I refused to leave the seat and said, "You people are ducking monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed that I had had a license, but there was just no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked it. I said I refused to leave the seat until I knew exactly what was needed. Manager said, "Tell you what, I can contact ICO and could get a verification that I had had a license there. It would take 3 minutes." That's when I yelled in the DMV, "Why wasn't that the first ducking thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. Story 2. I was always a really quiet kid, even as a toddler apparently. So one of the first times I remember losing my shit was when I got really tired of this 3rd grader picking on me on the bus. I was in kindergarten, and this kid kept popping his head over my seat and poking me. I timed it out, and the next time he did, I punched him straight in the nose, which he immediately started bleeding and crying. I didn't know it at the time, but apparently the kid's parents tried to get some disciplinary action against me. That was until they found out I wasn't the same age or older. They just didn't want to make a big stink out of their kid getting stitch-slapped by a kindergartner. Story 3. It was Halloween, and I was sitting out the front of my house watching my sister take my niece, who was around 4 trick-or-treating. The people who lived above us, we lived in a maisonette, decided to shoot a firework at them. This is the only time I've lost my shit. Got them inside the house, made sure they were all right. Sister had only a few non-serious burns on her arm and managed to shield my niece from the explosion. At that point, I was just so angry, went up to their door and starting banging on it, demanding they come out. They didn't answer, so I starting trying to kick the door in. My mum and brother dragged me away and back inside to calm me down. Half an hour later, the police arrived because the neighbors had called them about me. Luckily, after we explained what had actually happened, I didn't get in any trouble, but neither did they. Sorry for it being poorly written. I'm not the best writer. Story 4. I'd been dealing with listening to my dad and his ex-girlfriend have screaming matches and occasionally getting dragged into it for like a year. They started again one evening, and she addressed me, demanding me to answer something or another to fuel her argument against my dad. I was just trying to play a game at the time, and I just kinda snapped and screamed, "I don't know, and I don't care, and I'm tired of your fighting." It wasn't much, but I've never raised my voice ever, and I think it kinda just stunned them both into silence. She walked out of the house. Story 5. This guy at work was cleaning out the work break room. Basically, he was throwing out people's personal belongings. So I see my new coffee mug I bought specifically for work in the trash and lost my damn mind. I started yelling at him that what he was doing was morally wrong and it's not his stuff to throw out. I went to my HR manager and complained to him about the principle of the thing. I took all of the coffee mugs in the trash out and washed them. The good thing is, if you are a calm person, 99% of the time, people are more likely to listen to you in the 1% of moments you lose it. Story 6. Back when I was working retail, I was manning the return desk when this woman comes in to return 2 totes full of clearance clothes. She wants to rebuy them all since clearance stuff was now cheaper. That's against the rules, and I explain why. But per usual, she gets a manager, and the manager caves. Since she bought this stuff on 3 different receipts and mixed them all up, this transaction is fixing to take 30 minutes at least. And I am frustrated, but hiding it well. 15 minutes in, I hear some commotion off to the side. I turn my head and see that this woman's 5 or so completely unsupervised kids have piled onto a flat cart and are pushing it around. I don't know why it set me off so bad, but I pointed and yelled at them, raising my voice for the first and last time during my 10-year stint. The entire place fell silent, and the customer was so mad at her kids that she took her stuff and left. A couple co-workers said seeing me get angry was really unsettling. A blessing curse that comes with being the quiet one, I guess. Story 7. My brother and I played travel sports for a few seasons as kids. One trip, I was at the pool with some of his teammates messing around in the water, and the coach's kid was being a dick as usual. My brother was one of the smaller kids on his team, so the coach's son would duck with him a lot. Most of the kids on my brother's team disliked him, but didn't speak up so they wouldn't be next. He thought it would be funny to pick up my brother's drink right in front of him and spit into it. My dad taught me from a young age not to let anyone duck with my brother or sister, so I got seriously pissed. I took a good running start and shoulder-checked him into the pool. Since he had just gotten there, he hadn't taken his clothes off yet and cried because his phone and iPod got ruined. He literally ran out yelling, "I'm telling my dad." Well, that backfired because everyone stuck up for my brother, and the coach was not happy to find out what a shitbird his son was being, so he was the only one to get in any trouble. Story 8. This guy broke all of my markers back in middle school. I told the teacher and got him publicly embarrassed, but it wasn't over. I was holding my trumpet and he kept messing with my hair at a concert and just kept touching me. I've always been known as never being angry, but he did it again in a room without the teacher. I grabbed his leg when he kicked me and lifted it up, throwing him down. He never messed with me after that. Story 9. In high school, we had a friend who had chosen to be a little more promiscuous than others. We honestly didn't care. Besides enjoying kicks, her personality was entirely the same. However, it's high school, so one girl in particular took it upon herself to often shame and tell this girl she was a slut. We would all stick up for her, be the bigger person, and walk away. Except one day, this girl decided to shove through our group-knocking said friend over causing her to hurt herself. She laughed, called her a slut, and spit on her. I completely lost my shit, grabbed the girl by the hair as she walked away and yanked it, and then screamed at her that she's a hateful person because her mom chose crack over her. Then as I walked away, I pushed the door open so hard that when she tried to follow me, it swung back and hit her in the face. She stopped calling my friend a slut after that. Not my proudest moment, and I have not ever used physical violence or information that's meant to be private against another person again. Story 10. I grew up on a farm, and one day several cows decided that since their head could fit through a small hole in a gate, then their whole body could fit through a small hole in a gate. This resulted in a broken gate, a cow stuck in the broken gate, several cows roaming freely in a field after escaping through the broken gate, and me absolutely losing my shit. I now work in it. Cows are dumb. Story 11. My dad was in hospital after having a stroke. I was 14 at the time and still in school. This absolute little shit of a kid kept going on about how my dad was going to die, that he deserved it, etc. I put up with it all morning, but at lunch, he cornered me. Normally, I took all the beatings and bullying, but not that day. I lost my shit. I don't remember what happened, but apparently it took 3 adults to pull my 14-year-old 100 LB self off him. I regret ducking nothing. He didn't mess with me after that. Story 12. In healthcare, you get yelled at a lot for stupid stuff. Where's my ginger ale? Duck that doctor. He's an asshole for taking too long, etc. But one patient crossed the line. She didn't like that I called the previous hospital she was at the night before to get her records so I could see what was done. Completely legal. Done all the time so things aren't missed or repeated unnecessarily. And yes, she signed a release so we could do it. She then came out of her room and threw a full styrofoam cup of her urine at me. Dodged it by a millimeter, but it ruined a computer monitor. She then said, "Stick, I'ma leave here and duck up your family." Done. Shit lost. Screamed for security and personally put her back in her room with the help of every tech and nurse in the emergency department. 4-point restrained her for her out-of-control behavior that was a danger to the staff, and called the police. Once we got the records from the previous hospital, we found out she pulled the same act to a lesser degree the night before. After she was medically cleared, the police took her to jail, and my final words to her were, "Good luck in the clink. They love the urinators there." She was charged with battery and given jail time for that, and multiple parole violations. TL, doctor. Someone threw their urine on me and I sent them to jail. Story 13. I worked at a theater. I saw a father pressing his child's head down to get him below the mine height to not have to pay for a ticket for the child. The child was in pain. Ended up in a screaming match with the dad. Edit. Adding an explanation on why there's a height limit instead of an age limit. Well, I guess the system was designed for children who are small enough to not take up a seat, sit with parents in one seat, not having to pay. They then decided that this height, size at 90 to part 3 feet to be the cutoff point after which the parent needs to buy a seat for the child. It not so much as your child is young enough to not have to pay to watch a movie, more like your child is small-sized enough to not have to take up a seat. So one ticket entitles you one seat. You can buy a ticket for a seat for your child under 90 cm if you want, and utilize the second seat for your child or your bags. It isn't free seating. You get to choose which seats you want, so no one else have a claim on the seats you bought. Story 14. In secondary school, a girl sitting next to me kept emptying my pencil case onto the floor and laughing with her friend about it. So I punched her on the top of the head, sort of like a lever coming down. She cried and I got detention, but that was fine. Looking back, she probably fancied me. But you mess with Wispus, you get the lever thump. I'm 30 now. But if you empty my pencil case onto the floor, I'll still take a detention for a good downward thump. Story 15. As a surgeon, I try to remain calm and steady about most everything. Even all the staff comments about it, about how I'm the most calm surgeon they've ever met. One time taking out someone's gallbladder, the assistant needs to grab it and hold it up so I can free stuff up. Newer person was helping me and moving a little too fast without seeing where their instrument was going before grabbing the gallbladder. When the camera finds their grasper, they ended up poking a small hole in the liver. I let out an audible sigh and small grumble. Ended up not bleeding all that much and rest of surgery went fine. One of these days I want to throw instruments like some other people I know just to see how people react. Story 16. Back in school, tiny lockers stacked right next to each other. Locker neighbor would always close mine while I was fishing through my backpack. Went on every day for the whole year. He thought it was funny. Last day of school I'd had it. Punched him across the cheek. He didn't do it the next year and didn't bother telling any adult because he knew he was an asshole. Story 17. I never liked playing football in general just because I wasn't an aggressive person. But in 5th grade, I had a teammate who during practice scrimmages would always line up across from me. At the snap, he would grab me by my face mask and pull me to the ground. I let it go on for most of the season until I started having neck issues and pains, and still do. During one of out final practices, I was getting water across the field and decided enough was enough. I sprinted full charge across the field, sacked him with all my weight. And while I pinned him down, under me grabbing his face mask and repeatedly slammed his head into the dirt until my coaches pulled me off him. After practice, I was running laps until my mom came to get me, and when the season ended, I decided to switch to basketball. Story 18. I was in charge of a rollover trainer once at a military training site. Think of a Humvee on an axle that spins, like a rollover accident. Part of the safety brief before anyone goes in is to empty their pockets of all items. Take any items on belts off. We have rubber items inside to simulate shit flying. We do this for safety's sake. Part of the training is we stop the trainer on its side roof so the participants can get exposure to assisting the other passengers and exit the vehicle safely and quickly. It's been a long-ass boring as shit day. It's got, and like all good army training, I am hungover and irritated. All officers, and they aren't listening for shit. We stop the exercise on the roof for a group, and they all exit except one who can't undo the seatbelt. I open the door and reach in and placed my hand on a dual-edge 4-inch boot knife. I absolutely lost my shit. I saw red, my ears burned, and I distinctly remember seeing one of the other instructors mouth, "Oh shit." I chewed out every ducking officer there, all of whose outranked me, many of whom outranked my commander. Didn't matter, as my position was safety officer. I went on a tirade. I turn around after it was done, and my best friend is ducking, recording it on his phone. That prick showed that clip the rest of the week and for years after him. I miss that ducker every day. Updates. Sadly, that video is long gone, I imagine. Yes, I am former military, gladly retired. Story 19. In 6th grade, a group of some 4 kids took monopoly of the back of the bus. A true power move. I always minded my own business and tried to sit away from them. For one, they all didn't understand basic hygiene and smelled, even though they were older than me. Anyway, turns out the bus driver was their quiet, retired grandpa, who would never tell them to stop bullying or doing dumb shit. So one time they have a ducking spitting war, as in they spit across the seats at each other as they jump seats for cover. At one point I was the seat in the middle, and a giant wad of their disgusting spit hit me square in my face. I then proceeded to take my Pearson history book, one of those big, heavy, hardcover textbooks, and smashed him over the head with it. Granted, this was me telling them to stop their nonsense several times. The spitting stopped after that. Anyway, the book cover cracked and had to pay at the end of the year, but I regret nothing. Story 20. I'm a bit more quick to anger these days, but as a child, I was fairly quiet and such. When I was in 6th grade, I was always forced to go to church every Sunday and Wednesday. Perks of growing up in the Bible Belt. I've always been a pretty heavy reader, and like most kids at that time, I was heavily into the Harry Potter series. The people at the church my mother forced me to attend decided that those books were not only of the devil himself, but also surely corrupting me. They took every opportunity to tell me so. Making matters worse, the son of my Sunday school teacher decided he was responsible for correcting my devilish ways. In addition to harassing me about these books every chance he got, he also began getting physical about it. I pretty much just let it all go because it was just a bunch of idiots. What did I care? That is, until he spit in my face. Twice. I chased him down and proceeded to beat the shit out of him. I've only been in a few fights, but I've never been in one where I was this absolutely livid. He never bothered me about my choice in books again. I stopped being forced to go to church, so I guess it all worked out. Okay. Story 21. My friend and I were walking home from high school. Sophomore year, I think. He was really bothering me, kept lightly tripping me the whole walk home. I kept asking him to stop, but he didn't. For context, I did get picked on in high school, so maybe this moment just was the breaking point for some other incident. When we got near where we would separate, he did the tripping thing one last time, and I lost it. I swung my backpack at him. High school, remember. So I had heavy books, lunch bag, etc. Here's the part where he really effed up. He was carrying a balsa wood bridge home that he needed to complete for some class. When I swung the backpack, he dropped the bridge. I ran directly at him, but then saw another, better target. I could have kicked a 60-yard field goal. I grabbed my bag, turned and walked as he stared at his scattered work, saying in a shocked voice, "You broke my bridge." I replied, "I don't give a duck," or something to that effect. 15 years later, and he's one of my best friends. Edit. Spell corrected fiends to friends, you jerks. Story 22. Not me, but my older brother lost his cool when an ex-friend of mine threw a ducking ceramic pipe on hand-my, which somehow ended up cutting my wrist half open. My bro went to the kid and punched him right in the face, breaking his nose in the process. My hand was pretty d***ed up, and after 8 years, I still have a big scar on my right hand. Edit. I never imagined so many internet strangers would ask to see my right hand. Story 23. This girl viciously bullied me in school, told everyone I was a lesbian. At an all-girls school, this made you a social pariah. Even the foreign exchange students started rumors that my dad was gay, threw paper at me during class, and other nasty taunts. In history class, she was sat behind me and started kicking me through the hole in the back of my chair. I told her to stop it several times, but she kept doing it. I turned around and stabbed her in the leg with a pencil. Didn't draw blood, 'twas but a scratch. I got detention, but she left me alone after that. Story 24. I worked at a diner with an open kitchen. You can see us and we can see you. I'm the only cook during the lunch rush when I hear a lady shout, "Hey!" I look over and a lady sitting in a booth points at me and then does a very condescending "come here" motion with her finger. I thought something was wrong with her food, so I decide I can run out of the kitchen, leaving 4 orders on the grill, and see what I need to fix. She has no food on her table. She holds her blue soda cup out to me and asks, "What is this?" Excuse me? Why is my root beer in a soda cup and not a mug? I don't know. I'm just the coo. Oh, great! Another ducking idiot in this ducking place who doesn't know anything. She then proceeds to chew me out because I, the cook, do not know why the server gave her root beer in a cup. We have special root beer mugs, but the servers couldn't find them. Someone misplaced them. I apologize and head back into the kitchen while she's loudly talking crap about me to the next booth, to find that all of my orders are ruined and more had been coming in. It's already stressful working in a kitchen, and that was the last straw. I went in back, started screaming and kicking the shit out of the walk-in cooler. When I went back out, everyone was quiet and avoided eye contact. Even the lady with the issues. Still looked pretty mad, though. I rushed through the orders and thank God she left without saying anything. I didn't get in trouble, though, since my manager was serving and had to deal with her as well. He understood. Story 25. My car broke down yesterday. I was stuck on the side of the highway on a bridge with no exact reference to where I was. Called roadside assistance. They couldn't help cause I didn't know my location, so I ended up calling 911. They say an officer is coming, so in the meantime I call back insurance to try to get the tow truck. At this point, I've been in my car for about 40 minutes just roasting and panicking, but I finally get connected and explain how I'm on the side of the road. I'm okay, but 911 is coming because I don't feel safe in my location. I explain how I just want to give them my location so I can get my car towed. And the lady says, "Your guitar. You'll have to get your guitar." I flipped. It was a mixture of crying and yelling, but I was shouting, "Are you serious? My car? My guitar?" This went along for a couple minutes. Now I ended up apologizing later and explained how I was just scared. But geez, lady, yeah, I'm broke down on the side of the road and I need to get my guitar towed. Edit. For clarification purposes, I knew where I was, but not exactly where I was. I didn't call 911 because I was lost. I called to get an officer come help me because cars were getting really close, and I knew it to be at least an hour before any tow truck came. After I called 911 and told them my location, they helped me specify my exact mile marker. Even with that information, insurance was still unable to help me. I told the officer what I told the insurance company, and at that point, the officer asked me if I just wanted him to get a tow truck, and I said yes. Story 26. When my boyfriend and I were breaking up over the phone and I asked to come by to get a dress, I left at his place. He informed me he accidentally threw it out. This, and a combination of him telling me he didn't want a relationship anymore. After telling me 2 days ago we were fine, I lost it. I saw red and have never yelled so much in my life. Story 27. My friend is bad with math. I was explaining a thing once. It took 10 minutes. He tells me he doesn't get it. So I sit there and explain this thing more deeply. Took 30 minutes. He's like, takes in-ear headphones out of ear. He was covering it with his hand. "Oh, sorry I wasn't listening to you. Found this amazing radio recently. I lost my shit." Story 28. I lost my shit when my patient got her pre-authorization for surgery for a large grapefruit-sized pelvic mass denied by BCBBs. And when I did a peer-to-peer, the doctor working for the insurance company said I needed to have a psychiatrist rule out mental causes of her pain first. I had to walk away for 30 minutes before seeing another patient because had anyone given me any more lip, I might have gotten violent. Story 29. In the 8th grade, I decided to join the school wrestling team. I was overweight and not very good at wrestling, but I still tried. Every day after practice, while waiting for parents to pick us up, I would get picked on by any of a number of the other team members. One day, one of the guys decided to take it to the next level and punched me in the face 3 times. I stood there stunned with my ears ringing, and then rage took over. He was wearing a hoodie sweatshirt, and with my left hand, I reached over and grabbed the hood, pulling it over his head so his face was pointing down, and held tight while delivering uppercuts to his face in rapid succession while he tried to escape running backwards. I held on tight and kept hitting his face while the crowd watched me in amazement. After what seemed like around 15 straight punches to his face, I finally let go, and he continued to run backward. He stopped running backward after a few seconds, then came running back towards me. I'm thinking, oh great, here we go again. He got about halfway back to me and let out a wail that sounded like a combined scream and wolf howl, and then dropped to the ground crying. I turned around to a crowd of wide-eyed and stunned bystanders and walked to the door while they tended to him. The next day, he came to school with 2 black eyes swollen shut and bruises all over his face. The wrestling coach basically told the team to stop messing with me, and that was literally the last time I ever got into a physical fight. That was nearly 40 years ago. Story 30. I lost my shit one time when I was little, somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. That doesn't sound out of the ordinary, but I was a quiet, reserved kid who did do much out of line. Anyway, I have an older brother who tormented me all the time. This day he had been particularly shitty, but I still just took it and coped. My mom made burritos for dinner. I love burritos, but only if it's well put together. Sloppy sandwiches drive me nuts. Anyway, my brother and I are sitting down, waiting for my parents to sit at the dinner table too. My brother sees that I'm excited and is a bit privy to my sandwich pet peeve, so he takes just his index finger and smashes it down on my burrito as hard as he can. I get upset. So then he just open palm smashes the burrito on my plate into an absolute mess. I lose my shit and whip the burrito at him, missing and nailing the wall. Parents walked in just when I threw the burrito on the wall. They freeze, and then instead of yelling at me, they immediately ask my brother, "What did you do to him?" Hearing that I would not be punished and that they knew it was my brother's fault without seeing what happened made it a little bit better. I don't think I ever ended up getting a burrito that night, though. Story 31. This lady came to the shelter to see the cats. She asked if she could give them treats, and I said yes. It's a shelter where most of the cats are free, so gets the bag out. The cats are getting wild with anticipation, and she just stood there, laughing and tempting them without giving them anything. She looked like she enjoyed their anxiety, and her laugh sounded like a crazy person. I lost it, grabbed the bag out of her hands, gave treats to the cats, and asked her to leave. Those cats are already stressed out. Don't give them more anxiety. Story 32. Just this week, when two pit bulls forced their way under my fence and mauled my dog, I always worried that if shit went down and I had to act in an emergency, I would freeze up. Didn't happen. I called 911, screaming at the dispatcher that they were killing my dog, begging the police to get there. I was pounding on the window, screaming at the dogs at the same time. Just pure terror and helplessness. I was sure she was going to die, but instead, those dogs are dead, and my little Petey is going to recover. After I calmed down, I told one of the officers to apologize to the dispatch lady for me. Story 33. My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job, and our insurance and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170K. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break, and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. "He needs a beating," a fat 20-something said, no so quietly to her friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop, and it got on the verge of Bukowskian poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-faced friends. I launched into the smell of her twat, how fat she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind, drunk moron with a death wish as she was uglier than the devil's asshole on fire with the shit of hell. And it only progressed from there. F. Lee Ermey's Marine Drill Sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it. And this was a goddamn food court in a pissant southern town filled with pissant inbred mother-ducking hell-spawned redneck ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrass normal troglodytes. The food court was silent and all the eyes were upon us, and then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a puss-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day. Story 35. In the 6th grade, some kid was poking me in the back with a pencil for a whole class and was generally very rude to me for a long time. And after that class on recess, he said some shit, and I just lost it. And I just started mauling on him and had to be held by some really strong classmate. I don't remember a thing from the time I got angry to the time I was held by the classmate, but I think it's for the best. I have no memory of those 30 seconds. Story 36. My brother being disrespectful towards other people. He is a nice kid, but takes games too seriously. I called him out. He tried to justify his shitty behavior, and I got so pissed, I grabbed his arm way too hard and explained to him that is not okay to treat friends or anyone for that matter like that. He gave me a super angry look, but then broke into tears when he realized I was right. Then we hugged it off, Story 37 was a camp executive at my high school and was responsible for the entire guys' side during our week-long camping trip. As a quick backstory, there were 7 execs, 3 boys and 4 girls, in charge of about 140 students. The teachers had divided the girls' and guys' sides into different colors to make various groups for the activities we'd be doing all week. Out the 140 students we had to watch over, there were about 40 leaders, those that were to monitor their respective teams, and the rest were campers. For the most part, the majority of the guys were pretty chill, a little loud, but were following the rules. I don't mind a little noise as long as everyone's in their rooms when lights out happens, the time whereby no one should leave their cabins at night, unless to use the restroom. However, there was this one cabin, the ducking purple team. Lord help me here. I kept getting noise complaints from the other leaders regarding the purple team's cabin, to the point where the teachers were getting frustrated with us execs. If the campers make too much noise, it was the job of the leaders to handle it. If they can't, then the execs have to step in. If execs can't handle it, then the teachers have to step in, and no one really wants that. So I've gotten multiple complaints from almost every team about the purple team that I go in to check it out. As soon as I stepped inside, not only was it loud, but there was a distinct smell, a very earthy smell. I flipped the duck out, not because I have any problems with marijuana, but because if the teachers were to come down, this trip would be over before it even started. I don't think I've ever gotten that angry in my life before, and I don't think I got another noise complaint the rest of the week. Story 38. Lived with 4 people in college, a 2-bedroom with 2 of us sharing rooms. My roomie was awesome, but we only had 3. Enter Justin. Justin was a hot shit sandwich topped with a drug record and a rumored penchant for involving girls between 14-16, justifying it by claiming they are adults and America is just too uptight. These shitty traits aside, the roomie staying in the smaller room couldn't afford half the rent and knew Justin's girlfriend, so he moved in, much to my protest. He hated me for calling him on his bullshit, and I hated him for, well, read above. I don't judge other women when they date assholes, but I was also friends with his GF, and she was severely mistreated by him verbally, and sometimes rumored physically, though he's a jussy short stack and weak-muscled, and despite vanity muscles, could barely defend himself. Fast forward to the 3rd week, he's put off trash duty. First 2 weeks we covered for him. On the 3rd weekend, he planned a trip up north to drink with his frat buddies and didn't want to hang with gals, so I get it. But we told him he has to do the trash first. Saturday, I wake up 8 a.m. early for college kids. I see duffel bags in the living room, and he walks in to grab the last one and leave for his trip. Trash still spilling over. He makes an excuse he is too busy and will get it when he gets back 3 days later. Right. I stand to stop him from leaving, and admittedly, I'm a tall woman at 5'11", and was skinny at the time, but still stronger than this lil shit, much to his anger. He tries to push me out of the way, and I put my hand to his face, knowing it'll get him to swing. And sure enough, he slapped me and called me a stish, claiming that by not moving, I made him do that. Well, right after he finished that sentence, I sent my fist through, not at, but through his face, broke his orbital bone on his right side of his skull, and fractured the nose. He looked like hamburger face for the whole frat weekend after the urgent care trip, and never turned me in. Claimed he fell skiing because he never could admit a girl whooped his ass. Joke was on him. By the time he got back, myself and his then ex-GF had spread the word, and he never lived it down entirely. To this day, it's in my top 3 proudest moments. I hate violence, but I love when I get to stick it to a monster and cause them a life of shame. Story 39. My grandfather passed away, so I told my boss that I had to take a couple of days off to be with my family. He had the nerve to tell me work was more important than family and threatened to fire me. I went off on him in the middle of the office for a solid 5 minutes before quitting and rushing home. Story 40. During a group project during last year of what would be high school, I had been feeling pretty depressed for a while, and during that time all my emotions were locked away and kept boiling as if they were in some sort of pot. Two girls in our group decided the day before the actual presentation that it would be a great idea to make some sort of performance, and I said that there simply wasn't enough time to practice. The two girls got slightly angry, irritated that I was willing to give up the idea so easily, so they decided to call the teacher for something like a group meeting. During the meeting, I told them about my thoughts and my reasoning, and these two chicks decided to blame every problem on me even though I had finished everything I was in charge of. The last line they said was, "Don't sit there and feel sorry for yourself." And the pot boiled over, releasing every single emotion that had been stirring and came out as anger. I smashed my hand down on the table and most likely spouted some profanities that they most certainly didn't deserve. Not their fault I was feeling like shit. As I walked out, I punched one of the tables fairly hard so that the bubble gum that had been stuck underneath fell down on the floor. And then I walked out. The two girls started crying. My best friend laughed his ass off, and the other two girls were just shocked. Some time passed and I apologized, but I'm actually quite happy that the whole thing happened, simply because they made me feel emotions again, something which I hadn't felt in a very long time. Edit. Minor spelling mistakes have been fixed, and thanks to you, Shameless, so does Hill for not letting the story sound like a discovery of a new kink towards the end. Story 41. It's always felt like my parents never wanted me. I was a surprise honeymoon baby born, 9 months and a day after their wedding. I was regularly screamed at for anything I did until I just started hiding. I was called the practice child my whole life. My younger siblings got way more love and attention, etc. In my teens, they started taking in strays. If any neighborhood kids didn't want to go home, they could just be at our house all the time. Effectively, my mother would take my friends away from me to be her friends instead, one of which was a kid who picked on me constantly from the time I was 11. I guess they had that in common. That guy was kicked out of his dad's house and his mom's house when he was 20, so my parents took him in permanently. That killed me, but I always wanted their approval. So I was always calm and agreeable, always desperately trying to figure out how to get them to love me. So I went along with it. Years later, I'm married and have a son. This guy still lives with my parents. They continue to coddle and make excuses for him while criticizing me for whatever they feel like. One day, we're all at my parents' house, and my son is being a goofy 2-year-old, which annoys the man-child living there. So he gets furious, picks my son up by his ankle and spanks him. My parents claimed not to have seen it. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night because I was so upset. The next morning, I made sure the guy and my mom would be at home, and why wouldn't he be there? And I went to confront them with my wife. I dumped everything I had been putting up with on them for about an hour, including asking how my mom could allow this jerk to hit my son. She maintained that it didn't happen, so I went through the roof. I ended up crying because of all the pent-up emotion, so my fantastic wife took over. She said we wouldn't be coming back if the guy still lived there. So he yelled that he would move out and he stormed off after saying he didn't have to listen to this. My parents convinced him, not you, to move out shortly after we left. My mother expressed how disappointed she was that I didn't come to have a conversation and only came to dump on them. That, Shauna, was her big takeaway from everything I said, that I wasn't being fair to them. We went to counseling with them later. For months, it validated everything I had felt, but they never stopped lying and being defensive. One counselor said we should be on Dr. Phil. The other counselor said my mom is incapable of empathy. Both counselors called my parents delusional, but of course my parents didn't take any of that seriously. At one point, my dad asked me, "Who does he think he is to judge us like that?" As if he forgot that that's their job. Haven't spoken with them in almost a year, and life is so much better. Story 42. So earlier this year, my health insurance got messed up. I started making too much money to qualify for my state's Medicare. So healthcare.gov requested a notification from NJ Family Care to confirm I wasn't on it anymore. So in January, I called them to get said notification. They say, yeah, you should get it in a couple weeks. It never comes. Unfortunately, I had forgotten about it until healthcare. Gov sends me a message that they're going to raise my insurance costs if I don't get them the message in the next 2 weeks. So I call NJ Family Care again and explain to them the situation. They once again claim they're going to send me the notice and don't. So now, After getting an extension from healthcare.gov about this, I call up NJ Family Care once more and attempt to explain the situation, politely requesting the cancellation notice. But the woman on the phone gets an attitude with me, saying some stupid shit like, you know this is the cancellation department, right? And I lost my shit. What the duck is your problem? I don't understand why the duck you can't just send me this ducking letter. What's happening over there? Just look in the ducking file and cancel it. Yes, you stitch. I know this is the cancellation department. I want a notice that it's cancelled. I must have scared the shit out of her because the next thing she said was, I'll go get my supervisor, who solved the problem in 10 minutes, and I got my cancellation notice 3 days later. Story 43. Maybe not exactly answering this, but there was that time my jackass of an English teacher started verbally assaulting and throwing around a smaller notebook that I was using for notes to make a warning to others, without bothering to listen to me. It was my personal rough book that I was writing extra notes in, and not something that's meant for inspections and such. That was a big shock, considering in these parts you're brought up to treat everything concerning knowledge and learning with utmost respect. I didn't make an actual scene there, considering he's a massive fat bastard who enjoys making guys cry, but I did keep it in mind and lost my shit at an open house where he was busy boasting to all the parents about how scared we are of him, also our class teacher, at which point I looked at him directly in the eyes and said that definitely wasn't the case with him. That was definitely the most polite way I could let loose at him. Very satisfying too. Bastard left in a year for lucrative salaries. But not before me and my parents let a bunch of other senior teachers know about his true character. Story 44. This happened in some club ages ago. I was bouncing around on the dance floor with everybody else and apparently stepped on some dude's foot who had been standing there with his posse of 2 or 3 other guys watching people. I shrugged and apologized, then turned around to leave. Right then, somebody smacked me in the back of the head. Not hard, but too hard to ignore. I turned around, still calm, and said something like, "Look, I'm gonna walk this way. You guys stay here, and nothing more needs to happen." Turned around again. Got smacked in the head again. I was very much pissed off at that point. It didn't help that they looked at me all innocent. I couldn't even tell which one of them did it, so I just stuck my finger in the face of the dude whose foot I allegedly stepped on and recommended he don't do it again. Turned around once more, waiting to get smacked in the head again. This time, they poured a glass of beer in my back. That's when I completely lost my shit. Threw myself around and went straight at the guy. I was in full rage mode. Didn't care what happened next as long as that guy suffered. I could tell by the terrified look on his face he realized he had gone too far. His friends never stepped in to help him. After a while, people separated us, and that was that. I have no sympathy at all for people who resort to violence for solving their problems, but feel no shame for having snapped in that situation. I think I did everything in my power to avoid what eventually happened. Story 45. I had a job filling vending machines in my mid-30s and was servicing one of my larger accounts that we called full service. Basically, they had soda, snack, and cold food machines. Most of the customers, while on their break, would come over to me and request certain items. That was not a problem, but there was this one guy that would take it too far. A 21-year-old, know-it-all. He would stand next to me during his break, and he would constantly tell me how to do my job better and tell me about complaints other employees had, but they were not telling me in person. Those complaints almost seemed made up, just so he can have something to say. So one day, while I had the food machine door open and I was checking the expiration dates of the milk, he kept interrupting me and telling me to not miss the dates on the milk, and to make sure there is an even amount of chocolate and whole milk. I lost it. I stood up, and I got right in his face. I didn't yell, but I said loudly enough for others to hear. "Why do you always come over here and nug me while I'm trying to do my job? How would you like it if I went and started jumping up and down on the bed while your mom was trying to do her job?" He got extremely red and looked like he wanted to hit me. Then he walked away. I immediately shut and locked all of my machines and left. I called my really good friend, who was a supervisor at the time, and told him to be expecting a phone call because I'm probably going to get fired. Never got the call, and the kid finally left me alone. Story 46. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I was home packing my stuff to get ready for when my husband was out of basic training. I never yell or even raise my voice to hardly anyone ever. My dad has always had a wicked temper, and my sister also had a knack for starting yelling matches with him. One night, she forgot to do something she was supposed to, and the yelling started again. I ignored it up until he called her stupid. It got under my skin, so I spoke up a little, saying that he shouldn't call her that. He hollered back, "You are my daughters. I can talk to you however I want." That's when I snapped. I saw red for the first time in my life, and I completely lost it. I screamed back at him at how I was tired of him treating us like garbage when he lost his temper, at how we hid in the back room with my mom until he cooled off, and how all I wanted was to visit my family before I had to move over 12 hours away from them. I also threatened that if he ever wanted to see me again, then he needed to shut up and sit in the corner until he was done throwing a fit. I yelled at him for the first time in my life for a solid 30 minutes. I didn't stop until everything I had to say built over the years was out, and I saw him go from red-faced angry to what seemed to be guilt-ridden. When I finally stopped, he was quiet. He didn't say a word, and walked away. Shortly after I moved out, he went to a doctor and has been put on some medication to help with his anger issues. Now he's super friendly, and I haven't heard him throw a tantrum like he used to in over 10 years now. He has never spoken poorly to me or my sister since then either. Story 47. There have been multiple times where someone has cut me in line where I've freaked out. I'm the calmest, chillest person I know. I don't have a lot of nagging stress in my life, so it's pretty hard to get me angry. But when someone cuts me in line, I just can't help but get mad. I'm following society's rules. I'm waiting in line. Everyone else is waiting in line. Why can't you wait in line? I don't care what age, race, or gender someone is. I will fully flip my shit when someone cuts me in line. Not at first, though. First, I'll inform them there's a line. If they ignore me or tell me they don't care, I'll calmly explain to them that they have to wait in line just like everyone else. If they continue their behavior, I will just blatantly cut in front of them, unless they're further up in the group and not directly ahead of me, because I won't cut other people. Then it just goes straight to verbal assault. If all has failed with my normal tone of voice, every person who cuts in front of me sees me go insane. Edit. Ninja edit, because I wanted to report on my success rate for these things. Informing people there's a line, or trying to calmly explain to them they have to wait in line like everyone else has worked exactly 0 times. The only things that work are either causing a scene or cutting in front of them. Cutters never say anything about someone cutting them. Story 49. About 10 or 11 years ago, I was going through a bad period of my life, and part of this was having great difficulty sleeping. One late afternoon, totally exhausted, I tried to take a nap, and after a while, it actually worked, and I fell into a deep sleep. It can only have been a few minutes later that the doorbell rang. I woke up, knowing that was the end of the nap, but worried it might be some emergency or something. So I opened the door to find a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses standing there with their leaflets, wanting to try to convert me. I lost it. It was strange. I felt detached, like a bystander watching my own rant, massively surprised by how articulate and authoritative I sounded. I normally take my time forming sentences, and I'm certainly not used to being authoritative. Now, I can't remember exactly what I said, but the gist was that they had no right interrupting people's lives just because they have opinions that they think are better than those people's, and that they should be ashamed of their arrogance. And does my being an atheist give me a right to knock on their doors at times of my own choosing in order to try to change their opinions? I'd lost my temper now and again as a younger man, many years previous to this, by which time I was in my 40s. But this was an isolated incident, and certainly the most focused and directed outburst that I've ever delivered. Story 50. I was sitting on the ground at a bus stop because there were no seats on the benches. I had headphones in. An older man got off a bus and stood in front of me. I looked up and said, "Hi," then back at my phone. He motioned for me to take my phones out, so I did. He said something I couldn't understand, so I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying." I put my phones back in. He bent down, yanked my headphones out, and proceeded to whisper something about prices and hotels and keks. I don't actually know what happened next. I do know that I stuck my fist somewhere behind his knee and knocked him over, then started shouting that this man was soliciting me for prostitution. It wasn't really a decision, so much as a thing that my body just did. Story 51. Driving to work several years ago, about a 40-minute drive. Wintertime in Maine. There was a small chip in my windshield. Started off to work at 5 a.m. First, my gas pedal freezes down, so I'm going 100 mph trying to reach down and unstick my pedal. Got it unstuck. Avoid heart attack. Come upon stop and go traffic not 5 minutes later. As I am sitting in traffic, I watch the aforementioned chip in my windshield start to spider. Slowly, a large crack moves across the glass. I could feel the rage building. Seething anger, nothing could stop. I completely lose my mind with rage in the car. I calm down enough to take my exit. It's about 3 miles from the exit to work. Got pulled over in the parking lot. At work, for a cracked windshield. I lost my shit after the officer left for about 20 minutes in the parking lot. Went to work. Story 52. In a large group lecture, all the 10th grade history classes together. The room was similar to an auditorium, but all on level, essentially a really big classroom. The desks were long tables fixed in place, and the chairs were on spring-loaded pedestals that would pivot back and spin so you could get in them. The kid behind me kept slapping me on the back of the neck. There was some thing back then, late 80s, where you licked your index, middle, and ring fingers and kinda whip-slapped your buddy's neck. This kid wasn't my buddy, and I told him to stop a few times. The more he did it, the more pissed I was getting. My teacher wasn't too far from us, and she shushed us a few times. I had had enough, and the next time he did it, I pivoted my chair back, spun it to the side, and punched him so hard it spun him around and knocked him out of the chair. Everyone looked back to see what all the ruckus was about. He climbed back into his chair, holding his face, and looked over at my teacher. Like, YF! My teacher said, "He told you you'd better stop. Kid never bothered me again." Story 53. Just finished a 2-3 week run of work and school every day, and was first Saturday to sleep in. For the record, I can generally sleep through a tornado. 7 a.m. sharp. A construction crew starts busting up the street right outside my window. The incessant beep of the front-end loader backing up. Swear they had to be teaching a new guy how to operate the damn thing. It went on so long, and I had enough. Put on enough clothes to not freeze to death, and proceeded to unload years of whatever built-up anger I had on every hard hat within earshot. Not one of my best moments. Honorable mention to the time a door-to-door salesman woke me up from a nap, and the dogs freaked out when he rang the doorbell. 80 lb Mastiff stepped, clawed, on my bare foot when I answered the door, and it hurt like hell. Story 54. A co-worker friend had appendicitis and was rushed by ambulance to a hospital from work. Found out his appendix was at a point where it could have burst at any moment, so it was an emergency situation. Anyway, work ended, and myself and a couple other friends from work went to the hospital to visit him. We hadn't had any updates, so we really didn't know the extent of the situation at that time. We walk into the front entrance of the hospital, and no one is there. No receptionist, no wandering nurses, no one. There was a phone on the counter with a sign instructing us to pick it up, and we'd be transferred to someone who could help. Picked up the phone, and waited on hold for a solid 10 minutes before anyone picked up. They told us he was in some place in the hospital, so we head over there. We get there, and the receptionist says our friend is not there. He's in the ICU at this bed number. Okay, little scary as he shouldn't have to be in ICU. We go to the department, find his bed, and sitting there is a very old, unconscious man laying spread eagle. My friend is 20 years old, so that's definitely not him. We tell the nurse, and she can't find him in the system, as in, she had no record of him being at the hospital. She makes a couple calls and tells us he's in the ER, so we make the trek to the ER. Here another nurse tells us again that our friend is not there, and she also has no record of him in the hospital. Here is where I lost my shit. I yelled at her, not scream. I ain't no dance mom, but I certainly yelled and was not polite. I just wanted to find my friend. I was genuinely worried at this point if he was even alive. My friends started ushering me away, 'cause it really was only gonna get worse. I calmed down while they talked to the nurse, who offers no other help. We do eventually find him, only because another passing nurse heard us talking about him, and she happened to have been one who worked on him. She led us to his room, where he was perfectly fine beyond the post-surgery grogginess, just going through all the runaround. not knowing if my friend was okay, and the absolute incompetence of the staff pushed me over the edge. Icing on the cake, the hospital staff stole a silver ring my friend was wearing during surgery. Story 55. In 10 years of marriage, the one and only time I yelled at my wife was last year. She'd called me a bad name in front of our kids and I lost it. Weird. Honestly, I'm usually very good at keeping control. Losing my temper for any reason really never happens. But for some reason that just rubbed me the wrong way.